So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a concealed zip tote bag. So at the moment we're looking at a fairly standard tote bag. I've squared off the bottom so that we've got a little bit of width to it. But when I lift up the tote bag and we look in the top, you can see that we've got a concealed zip enclosure in there. So it's not using a concealed zip, it's just a standard zip, but from the front of the bag, you can't see that the zip's there. So I'm going to show you how to construct this bag and insert that kind of zip closure. If you want to replicate what I've done for the front of my bag, which is our flip and stitch tutorial, you can find the pattern for that on our website under the projects and tutorials page. It's a lovely design. You just need a variety of fabrics and you cut them into 2.5-inch strips. You don't need very much, so it's great scrap busting. This was just some remnants that I had left over. And then for the rest of my bag, I've used denim. So let's have a look at how much you're going to need and let's get started. Okay, so I've got my pieces of fabric. I've got patchwork and I've got denim for the outside, front and back of my bag. I've got some denim here which is going to be visible from the outside of my bag, but it's going to be on the inside of the top edge. I've got lining, and then I've got my zip, and I've got 4 pieces of denim which are going to attach to the side of my zip, and I've also got another small piece of denim which is going to be my zip tab. And all of those dimensions are shown on the tutorial, so you'll know exactly what I used, but of course you can scale this up or down as you wish. The first job is to get the outside pieces attached, so my patchwork front and my denim back. So I'm going to lay them right sides together, and I'm just going to decide for a moment which way round I would like the denim to be. So I could have it so that the bag is like this, and then that would match quite nicely with that centerpiece, which I think is the back of a piece of denim. Or I could have it so that the navy blue is on the outside, and I think I'm going to work with it that way. It kind of picks up the dark accent that I've got going on the front patchwork. So we're going to pin them together, right sides together. So that's the right side of the denim with the right side of the patchwork. And remember, if you want to do the patchwork, then you can just head to a website and look for the flip and stitch tutorial pattern on the projects and tutorials page. So I won't be pinning this, I'm going to be pinning this all the way around, but I won't be stitching all sides. I'm only going to stitch 2 long sides and 1 short side. And I want to have this side as my bottom of my bag because I like these fabrics a little bit more. So I'm going to pin this edge but not that edge, just to remind me which ones I'm pinning. And then I'm going to be stitching around this, and I'm going to use a 1 centimetre seam allowance, which is ample enough for this project. You could use more if you wanted, but you don't need to. I wouldn't use any less because I think then you're at slight risk of things coming apart a little bit. So I'm just going to use a 1 centimetre seam allowance, especially as it's a bag and it's going to get a lot of use. So I'll sew each side independently. So I'll be coming down here and then finishing off, and then I'll twist it around and put it back in my machine and come across here, finish off, and then I'll put it back in my machine and come along here and finish off. So I'll just pop over to the machine and do that, and then I'll come back. With my 2 pieces now attached, I'm just going to box the corners. So there's various ways of boxing corners. Some people cut a square out of the corner and match the edges. I'm just going to show you the corner technique. So I'm going to put my hand down inside of my bag, and I'm going to get my 2 seams to line up on each other. And it's quite easy when you've got a project like this where one side's quilted and the other side isn't. But however you do it, you can just feel with your fingers exactly where that stitch line is and make sure that it's sitting with the stitch line on the other side. So having found that, I'm just going to put a pin through there on that side, and then I'm going to do exactly the same with the other side. So just lining up my stitched seam lines like so. And if you've got a patchwork ruler at this stage, you could line the corner of it up with the corner you've created and check that your stitch line is coming down at 45 degrees, which is where it should be. So they sit nicely on top of each other, which is also giving me a bit of confidence that I've lined it all up okay. What I'm going to do now is mark how where I'm going to stitch to box the corners, and I'm aiming to get about a 2-inch depth on this. So I'm going to mark a line that is from the seam line, not from the edge of the fabric, from the seam line, so that I've got an inch going that way and an inch going this way. So I'm just going to grab my patchwork ruler. And I'm just going to mark on that inch. So I'm going to put my 1-inch line on there, and that's my inch. And I've just got a chalk fabric line that I'm just going to mark on here. I'm not sure how well it's going to show on the camera, but it will be enough for me to see to stitch. So I'm going to put that there, and I'm just going to put the pin through it as well. Okay, and then I'm going to turn over and do exactly the same on the other side. I have got a 45-degree line on this ruler just here, and you can see that if I square my ruler up with the edge of my bag, that 45-degree line is actually coming down my stitching, which is exactly what I want to happen. So I know that I have squared up the bottom of the bag really nicely. So again, I'm just going to put my 1-inch marker on that seam line and just slide the ruler down until I've got an inch going either side of the seam. And I've just popped that in place, and I've put a pin through that as well. Okay, I'm going to take that pin out, and I'm also going to take that pin out, and I'm now going to go over to the machine, and I'm going to be stitching along those marked lines where I've got my pins. So my boxing lines are now in place. If you're at all worried that you may have slipped slightly, now's a good time just to use your ruler, double check that that's the 2 inches that you were hoping for. And with that check done, I'll now just snip off the excess fabric from that corner that I don't need. So I'm going to leave about a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So just snip that off. And just snip that off. And then I can turn this through. And that is the outside of my bag, all ready to go. With the outside of my bag all prepared, my next job is to attach the fabric panels to the side of the zip. So I've got 4 fabric panels here, and the first thing I'm going to do is just fold over by 1/4 of an inch the short ends on each panel. So I'm just going to do that on this one, and fold that end over, and then I've prepared the other 3 panels, so I'm just going to check quickly that they are all the same length, because that's going to be an issue if they aren't. So there are the 3 that I prepared earlier, and let's just fold this one over to check that this is the same length, and it's a little bit longer, so I'm just going to roll one end in a little bit more. You'll notice that I said 1/4 of an inch, but I didn't actually measure. And I'm just going to tuck that end in a little bit more. Okay, so the check is that they are all the same length. Now, when we're working with our zip, we're going to have our panels of fabric so that they go right up to the zip stop at the top. So it's going to be positioned so that the edge of the fabric panel is in line with the edge of the zip stop, which is where that zip is at the moment. So I'm just going to open the zip up just so I can see that a little bit clearer. And then these are going to get placed. So one is underneath the zip, right side up, in line with the zip stop, like so, matching the top edge of the zip with the top edge of the fabric. And then I'm going to place one over the top of that right side down, lining up the edges of my denim as well as the top of the zip. So let me just get this pinned in place. So I'm matching up my side edges and then all 3 edges of the zip and the denim along the top edge. Just to show you exactly what you need to do at the zip stop end, you're going to fold the extra fabric back to the underside of the zip. So this one I've just pinned in place, but I'm just going to show you on this one. So you just take that extra piece of fabric and you're going to put that behind the zip and just keep it away from the actual teeth so it's not going to interfere with them. And that is how your zip is going to be at the end. So you're going to match that end up with the end of your denim and everything else along the top row. When you've got everything pinned and your zip tape is nicely hidden inside the end of your denim over here, what you can do now is slide your zipper down so that it's no longer in the area that you're going to stitch, and you're going to stitch down using your zipper foot on the sewing machine. Now at the moment I've just got these 2 ends pinned back, and I can stitch over those as I stitch all of this in place, and it will hold those back for me, and then I'll be top stitching those down later. I'm not going to do it now because otherwise I would end up with 2 lines of stitching on them. So I'm going to pop over to the sewing machine, and using the zipper foot on my sewing machine I'm going to stitch down and attach the zipper on one side. So just to remind you how to set up your machine, the zip teeth are going to be to the left of my needle. So I'm going to come down on the left hand side of my zipper foot. So I've loaded it to come down on the left. And then for my machine, the back edge of my zipper foot sits nicely against the ridge. And that's a really good place for me to stitch, which generally means that this front edge here and this edge are what I'm looking at to line up. And my edge of my fabric is coming in just inside the outside edge of that front bit of my presser foot. So we all have different reference points when we're looking at things. It's really important that before you start sewing, you work out what your reference point is so that you know what you're keeping your eye on the whole way through, and then your zip should go in nice and smoothly. So I'm just going to sew down this zip now and pop it in, and then we'll repeat the process for the other side. So I can just show you now how neatly that zip's gone in. So that's one side into the denim, and I'm going to take it over and repin so that the other side is done in exactly the same way. Just make sure when you're repinning the second side that all of your edges on both this side and the second side match up, and that also you've got your zip going in exactly the same place in relation to your denim. Otherwise, you might end up with your 2 fabric panels sitting either side of your zip in slightly different places. So just to show you before I sew the second side in, I've pinned along the top edge of my zip with my zip the right side up. I've got my 2 fabric pieces right sides together, and these are the other pieces from the side I first put in. And I've matched up on the right hand side and also on the left hand side so that all my pieces of denim are level. It's a bit thicker working with denim, so it's been a little bit trickier to get everything perfect. So just depending on what fabric you're working with, that might be slightly easier or slightly trickier, but just take your time really, there's no rush, and the patience means for a better result. So I'm going to go over to the machine and sew that in place. With my zip now inserted on both sides, I have just pinned closed the ends of the piece of denim, and I'm going to be doing some top stitching, and I'm going to top stitch down this edge here and across the top edge at the same time. You could do this in a thread that's just going to disappear into the background, or if you wanted to make a feature of it, you could obviously top stitch it in a different colour thread. So I could use any of the colours on the front of my bag, red or blue, and that might look really nice as well. Before you do the top stitching though, what we want to do is just trim away a little bit of the bulk from this seam here. So I've left one side as it was, probably easiest if I show you at the other end. So this side here hasn't been trimmed, and this side here has been trimmed, and it just makes a difference when you're stitching. So all you're going to do is cut away that little diagonal in the corner so that when you fold those 2 pieces over, they fold together a lot easier. So trim those 2 corners, and then we're going to top stitch by stitching out at the edges and down the side of the zip. And you can do that in a colour full thread, or you can just do it in something to blend in. I guess that depends how you feel about your top stitching. Okay. top stitching all done, I've now got to attach this into the lining of my bag. So I decided to construct my lining so that this check fabric is the bag lining that will actually be down below the zip, but the fabric above the zip will be denim. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One was because I thought that looked nice against having this as denim, and also because this is going to get pulled a lot when I open and close the bag, and so you want it to be a strong construction. And so by having denim at the top and then coming onto this zip system, it actually will give the bag a lot more strength and durability. So I have marked the centre of my zip fabrics, I've marked the centre of my top piece of the lining fabric, and I've marked the centre of the bottom piece of my lining fabric. And it's now just a really simple process of taking all of your fabrics. So this is my lining fabric right side up, and I'm just going to centre up and mark those pins. And then this is my other piece of fabric, and that's going to go on top right side down. So I'm just matching up all my pins, which should mean that my zip is centered into the bag. And I'm now going to pin along there, and I will stitch that in place. So the first side is now in place, and you can begin to see what the bag is going to look and feel like. So what we're going to do now is repeat the process, but for the other side. So I'm going to take my lining fabric and lay that on the table. And then I'm going to lay this on the table on top of it, right side up and right side up. And then the last bit is going to go on right side down. And I shall pin that in place and stitch it in place just like we have for the first side. So with both sides now attached, my next job is to join up the lining sides. So what I will be doing is pushing down the denim that's coming from the top. You can see I've got blue denim fingers. Matching that up and pinning that in place all the way down the side of my project. And at the other side, I will do exactly the same. So pushing the denim down as well, and I'll just be making sure that that zip is folded out of the way so that it can't get in the way. So I'll be sewing the sides of my bag, and I will be sewing a little bit of the bottom. I'm going to leave a big opening in the bottom because I'll be using it to turn through when I join the two bag parts together. So sew the sides and sew about a quarter in from each side corner along the bottom of the bag, making sure not to trap the zip as you go. Having stitched the sides of my project shut, the lining shut, I'm now just going to box the corners so that the lining of the bag is boxed as well as the outside of the bag. So I'm just going to stitch across those corners and trim back. Okay, so my lining is all now boxed and ready to go. There's a couple of long threads I'm just going to take off. So we're now just going to join our bag pieces together. First things first, at the moment the zip is not fully open, so I'm just going to open it all the way. And I'm just going to tuck this tail so that it goes down inside the lining, just like that. And then I'm just going to bring the lining up and let that zip open all the way. So the lining is now right side in, and the zip flap is poking down. Okay, and then into that we are going to slide the outside of our bag, like so. And I'm just going to, for the moment, pop a pin to match up my side seams, and then I can just check that everything is the size that we were hoping for. Just a quick little check, because you've got to put the handles in a minute. So I'm just pushing open my seams and just checking that if I match up my side seams, everything else will match up too. And yeah, that's looking good. Fab. So handles. Handles is quite a personal thing. You need to decide what you're going to use the bag for, whether you want short handles, long handles. So best to have a look at any bags you've got at home that you like the length of, try them on, decide how long those handles are and use that as a really good reference point for the handles that you're going to cut. Okay, so having decided on your strap length, I'm actually going to go for what I call a short handled tote, which is a bit like a project bag. So I'm going to have quite short handles. They're 15 inches in total, which is allowing for some of it to be inside the bag, sewn into the seams. So that's the sort of bag that I think this is going to make. For me, that's going to be the best make. So what I've done is I've marked the centre of each side of the bag. And then what you have to remember is that the handle is going to go down between the two layers, and to make sure that that handle doesn't twist. So don't put it in like that, because there's going to be a twist in that handle. You have to be able to follow the inside edge all the way around and come back out on top. So that's how it's going to go in. So I'm just going to measure 2 inches from the centre, and that will be the inside edge of my handle strap. So that's going to go there. So I'm just going to pin that in place there, just through one layer at the moment. And then I'm going to put the marker there and do 2 inches from there. And pin it again, just to one layer at the moment. Then that strap goes down inside the two, and then I can carry on pinning around the top of my bag. So I've got a 15-inch strap, and I'm positioning it so that the inside edge of my handle, when it comes up like this, is 2 inches from my centre point. So I'm going to go around, position my other hand in place as well, and pin all around the top of my bag. So I'm all pinned around the top of my bag, and my final check is to look from the top down and check that my straps are matching and lined up, which they are. So now I'm going to sew all around the top of my bag using my 1 centimetre seam allowance. And where the straps are, I will do a little bit of reinforcing stitching. So all stitched and attached at the top. So I'm now just going to pull my bag down through my lining. Like so. It's quite an easy turn through. And then I've just got a few threads that I want to trim on the way, get rid of. Like so. The inside of my lining I can now sew shut, but if I just pop that down inside the bag, what I want to show you is we're now going to push that denim piece down inside the bag and create the top seam to our bag. So let me just pop some pins in, because we'll top stitch around the top of the bag. So I'm going to do this all the way around the top of the bag. And you could at this stage as well give it a lovely iron. I'm just rolling that seam out at the moment using my fingers, but an iron would help as well. Like so. My lining is down inside my bag. I need to sew that shut. And then my zip, if I just pull that up, is across the inside of my bag, like so. So all I have to decide now is I'm going to top stitch around the top of my bag. What colour do I want to work with? And then I've also got the option of whether I put a tab on the end of my zip. So there was a small piece of fabric that we cut out, and I will find that and I will show you how to put a tab on your zip. Okay, so I found my little piece of tab fabric. So fold the short edges in by 1/2 inch, and then fold your long edges in by 1/2 inch, and then fold your tab in half. So you'll end up with something that looks like this. And you'll have 2 sets of ends like this. And then what you're going to do is push your zip right way up so that you're then going to fold the other half of the tab behind you. And it folds around the zip like that, and then you're going to sew that in place using a stitch all the way around the outside using a square. So you're going to stitch all the way around that. Now on my bag I'm not going to have that hanging out, it's going to be tucked down inside, so I actually am not going to bother to do that, but that's what you would do if you wanted to put a tab on the end of your zip. And you always fold it so that the fold goes to the back, so you have as little as possible showing on the front of your zip here. You don't want really for it to be looking like that on the front edge. Okay, so I'm just going to top stitch around the top of my bag, and I think what I'm going to do is put well, I've got quite a light thread, a light grey thread at the moment, and I think I'm just going to keep that in place and top stitch around in that, because if I put something dark in, it's going to show on this side, and I wouldn't like that really. I like that being not really, I don't want to see any stitching on that side. So I'm just going to top stitch around in my light thread and give my bag a press, and then I'll come back and show you the finished article. Okay, so here we have the finished project. I've done my top stitching around the top and I've sewn the inside shut, and I've now got my zip opening inside, so I needn't worry about anything falling out if I use the bag in the car, or if I've got it over my shoulder, or I'm carrying it around. It's got a nice zip inside, and you perhaps can now appreciate the reason why I chose the denim and the denim, because this bag is going to get pulled a lot with that zip, and I want these 2 fabrics to be nice and strong for when I'm using the zip. So there we are, that's my zipped closure tote bag, and I hope you've enjoyed that project. Don't forget you can download the pattern for the Quilt As You Go patchwork front if you'd like to do that too. It does look quite charming and quite cute, and I really hope you've enjoyed this project. If you go on to make one, don't forget that we do like to be tagged on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find us at Made and Making. Take care.